On Ice Hockey UK TV in association with Intermotor. Delighted to be joined by the CEO of IHUK, Henry Staelens. Henry, thank you for joining us and welcome. There's a lot to talk about how things are changing and about how the federation's going to look going forward. I think where I want to start, we've just launched the new strategy. Just talk us through it. What's it about and what does it entail?
Yeah, firstly, thanks. Hi, Chris. So the new Ice Hockey UK organisational strategy has been in the works since I joined, really. So good 18 months or so. And really, it's about giving direction to IHUK, giving direction to the GB programme, and also the wider sport in general. So I think maybe it's something that ice hockey is lacked for um, too long. If you listen to a lot of people, that there's not been a clear direction. There's not been enough unity amongst the different bodies. There's not been enough planning about how we can grow the sport and improve the pathway for GB athletes from all the way from England, Scotland through GB pathway up hopefully into the elite league or the NIHL or overseas. So really, this is about setting a clear direction on how we do that and how IHUK will support that both financially and operationally.
I think it's also keen to stress that this is about on the ice, but off it too. Those both things are probably just as important of each other, really, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, if we're not effective off the ice, then we're never going to be effective on the ice. So how we operate, how we conduct ourselves from the boardroom through to how we organise our coaching sessions and our planning with the different venues and how that all knits together. Again, bringing in England and Scotland as well as our preferred bringing them in as our preferred pathway to GB. We need to basically empower everyone within the system, every single coach, every single physio, every member of the support staff to deliver their very best in more professional environments so that our GB players have the opportunities to play professionally eventually, if that's the route they want to go. So we need to produce more players at the bottom of the funnel, and we need to obviously look after them as well as we can throughout their journey. And then hopefully we'll have a greater quantity and of course quality when they get to sort of maturing at sort of 20, 21, 22.
You mentioned working closely, and obviously that would be with EIH, Scotland, the Elite League as well. Again, I think you mentioned in early answer, people had talked about this for a long time. What makes you confident that this time you working together with them will be something that will happen and can continue happening going forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's probably the question on everyone's lips is how do we know this time is different, right? So even if we look at what we've done in the last 18 months and where we're at now with the different affiliates of ours, we've got a director from each affiliate on our board. So we've got Todd Kelman from the Elite League, we've got Jamie Thompson from Scottish Ice Hockey, and we've got Duncan Hoff from England Ice Hockey. So that was the starting point. If you break those down, we're in discussions about a 5-year partnership with the Elite League. That, of course, touches on imports, but it also touches on how we can get their coaches and their staff more involved with GB athletes in the pathway. Can we do something in the playoff weekend? Really, how can we work closer together, like with the two, I guess, biggest hockey operators in terms of finance in this country. So we need to work together to produce GB players. We of course need them for the GB teams, but the Elite League also of course want more GB players coming through because it's good for their product as well. So yeah, we're in a really good place with the Elite League, with England, as you'll see announced. We're entering a shared services agreement. So I will oversee both organisations as chief exec, but we'll also have a chief operating officer overseeing the day-to-day operations of both organisations as well. Our performance teams are working a lot closer. So again, how can we empower England's coaching teams and their pathway to produce the players that GB needs when they reach 16? And the same with Scotland. We work very closely with Scotland. We have a really good relationship. How can we unlock funding for them from Sport Scotland, north of the border? How can we give even greater representation to their athletes? You'll see that's increased really well over the last couple of squad selections. We're giving in the past there might have been the view that out of sight, out of mind up in Scotland. That should not be the case. So we've got much more robust selection processes in place where whether you're in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, or England, you have the same opportunity to reach GB if you're good enough.
One of the things I want to pick up on is the Athlete 2 programs. We're very lucky in this country to have a lot of former players who are very passionate about the game, and two players that are working on this program with you, Matthew Myers and Jonathan Phillips, two legends of the sport and massive, massive players in GB's past. Just explain a bit about how those programs will work.
So the Athlete 2 programs, for me, it's a no-brainer. It was quite apparent that a lot of GB legends across both the men's and women's game, when they retired, they lost contact with IHUK and with GB in a professional capacity. So that was a real shame because their experience and what they've gone through and their values of representing GB, they built the foundations for what the next generation, for the opportunities the next generation does have and will have. So it's really important to me that we have those kind of personalities back within IHUK, whether they want to be on ice coach like Matthew Myers, or they want to take more of a mentoring role like John O'Phillips, and also obviously of course David Clark joining the board late last year. So we're looking at the different types of personalities we get back into GB. They should never have left in the first place, and that's on us, not on them, of course. And then how can we utilize their expertise? How can we scratch the itch for them as well? Because they all want to give back to GB. We've just got to give them the right vehicle to do so. So whether that's a coach or a mentor, or of course David joining our board, I think it's really important that we recognise the value that the ex-GB players have, and we give them a place to pass that on to the next generation.
With all this, it's all very exciting. I guess what I want to know from you is your vision. How do you want Ice Hockey UK to look in the future? I'll say 5 years, it could be shorter, could be longer, but what do you want after all this is implemented? How do you want the federation to look within the sport?
It needs to be far more professional. That's something we've been working on for, ever since I've been in place, and I'm sure before that, but every single touch point needs to be more professional, from how we conduct ourselves in terms of communication through to how we treat our athletes, how we look after our coaches, through CPD and their contracts, and absolutely everything needs to be more professional. It's the third most popular sport in the world in terms of fan engagement, participation, value, and media interest. It's the most popular sport in this country by I think a country mile. I think it was 1.2 million league tickets sold last year across the Elite League, the NIHL, etc. So it deserves a more professional approach, and we're certainly giving our all to get to that point now. So I think in 5 years it will be a far more professional sport, to the standard it deserves. It should have greater exposure in the mainstream, for the quality of the product, the popularity of it, the commerciality of it as well. It's a great place for brands and companies to align with, and it's a great place for fans to go and watch casually, or those who turn up week in, week out. And I think the main thing really, in ice hockey that I'd like to see changed, which we are working on every day, but it will take a bit of time to get it right, is unlocking barriers. So that's really, for me, is about, maybe ice hockey's become a bit elitist because of the costs involved, and I think that's completely the wrong way. It should be, if you're good enough and you're ambitious enough and you really want to play, like, in fact, the cost of the kit or the cost of the ice time, etc., shouldn't be so burdensome that it pushes you out the game. So we want to make sure that we keep athletes in the game as long as possible. We want to support them on that. We want to remove those barriers for them, so it's not just those who can afford to stay in the game that stay in the game.
And talking of, lifting the sport, pushing it higher to professionalism, brings me on to something that's been talked about a lot in recent weeks, and that's about a potential bid for the 29 World Championship. There's probably no bigger pinnacle in the world of ice hockey, really, than hosting a top flight World Championship. What can you tell us about that bid, and how far down the line is it, and is it a realistic possibility?
There's a few questions in there. I think, is it a realistic possibility? I hope so. We've submitted a letter of intent to the IIHF, which is something you have to do by September the 1st, and then you have to officially bid by I think it's the 1st of January. I might be slightly wrong on that date. But the 1st of September was the key milestone of putting a letter of intent in. We've been looking at this for over a year. The viability of it, the potential venues, of course, all the finances that are involved. It's a huge event. Like you say, it's the absolute pinnacle of our sport at international level. Prague, where I was lucky to visit a few months ago, where our GB men were, saw over 800,000 tickets sold. I think it was, Old Town in Prague was absolutely, there wasn't anyone not wearing a hockey shirt. They turned a huge profit on the event, which they'll reinvest back into their sport, which we would love to do. It takes the burden, of course, off the public purse if we can generate our own income, which we already do. We're one of the only sports that actually generates our majority of our own income. About 75% of our turnover is organic through tickets, sponsorship, merchandise, etc. So yeah, we want an opportunity to bring an event of this scale and this interest to the UK. But we need government support for that. So we're working through that at the moment, and hopefully we'll be able to put a bid in by the end of the year. But we'll update more on that.